All right, let's go New England Patriots here. They are coming off another 4-win season, back-to-back 4-win seasons. Drake Maye, one and done as head coach. Mike Vrabel comes in, takes over. The over-under's up to 7.5. Not only does Vrabel come in, but you had as much movement and off-season activity as any other team between a deep draft class and a lot of free agent money spent for the Patriots. So
massive turnover.
For the first time in a couple of years, there's some level of optimism with the Patriots. Year 2 of Drake Maye, Vrabel coming in. What are your thoughts? Stefon Diggs, the big name that they brought in that no one else wanted, but they brought him in, and in camp so far, sounds like he looks pretty good, and I think he could be a difference maker. What are your thoughts on the Patriots?
Yeah, I mean, we've said it for a while now. I think the Patriots have one of the broadest range of outcomes of any team in the NFL this year. It could all be a disaster easily. I mean, well, it could be, right? We sort of saw this a year ago. It's a little bit like Chicago, right? Where everyone was so optimistic this time a year ago about everything Chicago had done. They've upgraded the receiving core. They got Caleb Williams. Everything's great. And then it didn't all work out. And now we're praising them again for the great offseason, right? It's kind of like the Patriots. I mean, process-wise, we really liked what they did a year ago. They got Drake Maye. They decided not to move off that pick and assemble draft capital and try and do it that way. They took their quarterback. He looked great. And then they sort of shotgunned offensive line and receiver with the rest of their draft picks, which I think from a process standpoint is the correct way of doing it if you're going to take the quarterback. And none of those guys worked out. None of them. They were all, I mean, the receivers in particular were awful. Jalen Polk, nothing. So as much as we like what they've done this offseason, it doesn't mean it's going to work. I mean, Stefon Diggs, sure, he could be your number one guy. He could also be an old, broken down receiver coming off an ACL injury, right? And not add anything to the group. Kyle Williams, we love his route running, and he could be your number one guy really quickly. He could also be a guy that was drafted where he was drafted. So there's definitely a world where none of this works out. Drake Maye doesn't take a step forward, remains sort of mercurial, inconsistent, capable of doing amazing things, but also prone to a couple of bad decisions a game. But I think the flip side is also true, where this could be the year that the moves they made do hit. And if all that happens, like if Will Campbell's stumpy little arms don't matter, and actually he's just a good left tackle who's already shown he's a good left tackle in the SEC against top competition, Diggs still has some juice. Kyle Williams is an elite route runner. All of a sudden you look at this group and you say, with the great Morgan Moses comes in, solidifies like a rock right tackle. You could easily talk yourself into this team being not just like passable, but good.
Yeah, when we did win projections this offseason, we said massively wide range of outcomes here because of everything that you've laid out there. Drake Maye, as a rookie, I think easily the worst situation of any quarterback. Between the offensive line, there was a point last year where they had 3 starters on the offensive line who had like a combined 100 snaps in the NFL. And that's what he was playing behind.
That's not ideal.
The best thing Drake Maye did, and that staff did, as I've said, is Drake Maye taking 30% of the Drake Maye taking 30% of the snaps while Jacoby Brissett was the starter. I think that's the one lasting legacy that maybe the entire league should adopt, is the idea of actually developing the quarterback and not just saying, well, you're the backup, sorry. Saying everything we need to do has to point to making this guy ready to play. And I would say, given the circumstances, the questions at receiver, the awful offensive line, Maye did pretty well. Was excellent running with his legs, and particularly it was as a scrambler. They weren't designing this for him. Got concussed twice. He's got to not take as many hits, but I think Maye showed that his athleticism plays at this level. He made a lot of big-time throws, had some boneheaded plays in there, had some just pure accuracy issues, which showed up at UNC. But I think the kind of like Cam Ward. I think for me, it's the big play potential that Maye brings to the table, even if he's going to miss a few layups and turn it over a couple times here and there. I just think the big play potential is something they haven't had since Brady, and that's part of what the volatility comes from with this offense. But I think Maye has a chance to make some special throws. And make some big plays for this offense.
He does. I mean, where he's going to settle in terms of performance level is such an unknown, because I was so impressed by how he looked last year in that terrible situation. But it was remarkably consistent that he kept having 1 or 2 disastrous decisions per game. And this is where, this is why quarterback evaluation and projection and all that kind of stuff and draft scouting, it's so hard because on the one hand, you've got these two things battling against each other. On the one hand, we know that one of the most consistent, predictable, sticky traits, data points year on year is those boneheaded decisions, right? Guys that are prone to those do not tend to eradicate them from their game. It tends to be a thing that sticks year to year. But we also know that a terrible situation increases the volume of those things, right? Being under pressure constantly means you're going to make more bad decisions and create more terrible plays. So how do those things work out this year? Theoretically, that's a trait that's inherent in Drake Maye, but also theoretically, everything around him made him more likely to make those bad plays last season. And those things should be better this year. So does that mean he's going to cut way down on the number of bad plays? Or is that just Drake Maye and we have to try and get that back on the other side?
You have Josh McDaniels coming back in as offensive coordinator, another disastrous stint as head coach with the Raiders.
What a legacy.
Oh, man, I saw Jimmy Garoppolo and Devontae Adams talking about it like man, some dark times, man. Dark times.
People hate that guy as a head coach.
They hate head coach Josh McDaniels.
Hate him.
But offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels has done pretty well. Now, most of it was with Brady, little Cam Newton, little Mac Jones, but overall it's been pretty good. I think the Maye's ability to throw to the middle of the field, I think will work well in McDaniel's system. Demario Douglas already looking really good in camp. And honestly, every time he's been out there in the NFL,
he's a good player.
He's looked like the best receiver. So I think, look, I'm not calling this the best receiving core in the NFL or top 5 or anything, but if Diggs is 80 or 90% of what he's been in the past, that's still a number 1 wide receiver in this group. Kayshon Boutte's having a good camp. Demario Douglas, I think, is an excellent slot receiver. Rookie Kyle Williams, Mac Hollins on the outside. It's a little bit how they've built it the last couple of years. There's no true alpha unless Diggs is what he was 3 years ago, but still, that's not a bad group. It's reasonable, and it's certainly better than what they've trotted out there the last couple of years, plus Hunter Henry and Austin Hooper at tight end. So you have options there, and then you've got the offensive line, probably 2 rookies starting. Will Campbell at left tackle.
Next to each other.
Looks like Jared Wilson from Georgia, 3rd rounder. He was in the 3rd round, right? I keep, again, mixing up my mock drafts with reality. But Wilson played center at Georgia. He looks like he's going to be slotted in at left guard. I loved him as a prospect. But you've got 2 rookies on the left side.
Yeah.
Morgan Moses at right tackle. Can they creep back toward average? Again, I think that's possible.
Yeah.
But I also could see this idea that, hey, you're still a year away in this entire offensive line rebuild. Hey, guys, real quick, only 40% of our viewers are actually subscribed, so let's change that. Hit that subscribe button, and now let's get back to the action.
That's what I'm saying. You can very easily imagine both pictures panning out. I mean, there's definitely a 5 wide receiver man room there, or even a 6, where you're like, this is not a bad receiving core. Certainly it's perfectly serviceable. And like you said, maybe it's missing the true superstar, but it's more than enough for Drake Maye to look good. But you can also imagine a world where it repeats a year ago, and it's we're going, how does, Kayshon Boutte, we already know he's not good enough for this kind of, you can imagine a world where it doesn't work. Same with the offensive line. We really like Jared Wilson. Will Campbell is maybe he's not a great player, but he was a good player. Mike Vrabel, I think, can be a very good player. Morgan Moses is solid. You can picture the group being fine. You can also picture Garrett Bradbury has been, an underwhelming disappointment for Minnesota for years. He's now the center here. 2 rookies, unlikely to play high-level play. Maybe Will Campbell's arms will be a problem at the NFL level. And even in college, people described his tape as good, not great. Maybe that's going to be an issue. So it's very easy to imagine 2 radically different performance levels, certainly for the offense. The defense, I think, is more tightly grouped in terms of where they're likely to land. They've got a lot of additions in the offseason. There's some very interesting players that were already there in terms of Keon White, Christian Gonzalez at corner. I think the defense should be pretty good.
Yeah, the defensive line depth. And I want to talk about the cornerback group as well, but the defensive line depth, Christian Barmore coming back, with full season of Barmore, coming off of his health scare basically last year. Yes. So you've got Barmore. They spent a ton for Milton Williams, $26 million a year, huge number for a defensive tackle. And even if Milton Williams isn't a superstar, I think him and Barmore as a 1-2 punch. They bring in Harold Landry. I think, fine against the run. He's not an elite one-on-one pass rusher, but, knows Vrabel, knows the scheme. And Keon White is probably the biggest wild card here because of his strength, power, and you get into this different body types and style. And Kayvon Chason had a really nice year. I don't know, he'll never look like a former first rounder. He's a former first rounder who probably will never look like a first rounder, but is a nice 3 on the edge, having a nice camp so far. So I think there's a world where this defensive line, a lot of their additions in the 6 or 7 deep that they're rolling actually ends up being pretty good.
That's what I was going to say. Apparently he looked like it the other day in training camp.
No, I know. I mean, that's fine. I mean, that's sometimes guys later in their career, and Jason was good last year with the Raiders. I mean, good at various points, made some big plays. So, and then you have the 1-2 punch of Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez at corner. Now, Gonzalez got hurt. See what happens with him over these next few weeks, but he looks like one of the best young corners in the league, and Carlton Davis, I think, can still play.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you have those 2 guys on the outside, man, it has a chance to be a pretty good defense, or certainly much better than they were last year.
It does. I mean, I'm intrigued by what you're going to get from Milton Williams. I think it's going to be interesting to see how he does outside of that defensive line in Philadelphia where they had so much talent around him. He was great last year, but it's impossible not to recognize that, when Jalen Carter is on the defensive line next year, you're not going to get the sole attention. Jalen Carter is probably going to get the most extra recognition from that offensive line in terms of where we have to block first. Now all that's going to go to Milton Williams. He's the alpha there because of the money they paid him, because of the season he just had. Can he replicate the same kind of performance or even get close to it with less help around him?
And then, so just to touch on Vrabel for a minute here. His first year coaching with the Titans, 2018, they were 9-7 for 2 years, but in the 2019 was when they made that run to the AFC Championship, and then they won 11 games in 2020, 12 games in 2021. They're the number 1 seed in 2021. And it was right around that time where I was like, this guy's the next Mike Tomlin. He's never going to have a losing record. I don't care what you give him for a roster. This dude's just going to win. And then, they're under 500 the next couple of years. He gets run out of town. But the roster got absolutely depleted by that point. And I was so impressed with what Vrabel and the Titans did in 2020, in 21, to win 10-plus games. Remember, every single week we were like, who made the plays for the Titans? Oh, it's Danico Autry. It's Joe Schobert. He just got the most out of that roster.
Yeah.
And until he couldn't anymore, until it just got so wrecked. In particular, losing A.J. Brown coincided with
Something
losing.
He didn't want to do.
It coincided with losing A.J. Brown. So I'm interested in this reclamation project of Vrabel and his career because I think he looked like a difference-making coach until the roster just was so bad he couldn't do it. I do think he's worth the hype and we'll get this thing going in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's fundamentally a very good coach. I think the problems in Tennessee were twofold. Number one, so he butted heads with other people. He might be a character, and this is a constant debate about is he part of Bill Belichick's coaching tree. I mean, this is a Belichickian type of trait, right? Is Belichick kind of a prickly asshole in a lot of ways at times, but you can overlook a lot of things when you win, right? People will go along with quite a lot of things if the outcome is winning the games at the end of it. And maybe when that stopped being the case for Bill Belichick, suddenly a lot of his shtick wore thin and people were no longer willing to put up with it, and that's, things start to unravel. Vrabel didn't seem to play well with some others in Tennessee, and ultimately that seems to have been the thing that cost him his job. However, he also seems to have been right in quite a lot of those conflicts, right? Vrabel did not want to get rid of A.J. Brown, and that, I think, was a mistake relative to what Tennessee could have done. Paid A.J. Brown, kept him in the building, kept an alpha, difference maker there. So I think that's a question. How does this work in New England? Is he able to have a more collaborative approach with people, or at least keep them on side rather than turn every disagreement into a major conflict that causes problems? Will his style rub people up the wrong way, or can he just get winning enough games that everyone stays on board anyway?
All right, man. Over under 7.5. Repeating, if they won 6 games or if they won 10 and snuck into the playoffs, I don't think I would be surprised.
Right.
Either way. Where are you going with the over-under here?
Okay, based on the logic that anytime we have question marks at quarterback, you end up in this 5.5 to 7.5 range. This is the same win total as the Vikings. Now,
No, they're 8.5,
I
right?
thought they were 7.5.
I mean, it's not that far off, but they're
Right.
yeah.
And okay, Minnesota has a tougher division, so that makes an impact, et cetera. But it feels like there are way more question marks on this team than there are for the Vikings. So just by that logic, I'm going under.
So
By the way, remember just a couple of teams we throw this in with. The strength of schedule thing. There's only really 6 teams that it makes any difference for whatsoever that are on the fringes in either direction. The Patriots have the second easiest strength of schedule in the NFL, according to sort of projected win totals as opposed to last season's win totals. So this is a good strength of schedule to boost that, which is probably a factor in that win total as well.
yeah, so that's why I'm going to go over the 7.5 because my logic's going to be I didn't trust Jerod Mayo as the head coach. That ended up after week 1 that proved true. I didn't trust the coaching staff that he put together. It didn't make a ton of sense to me. It just in the roster I thought was clearly one of the bottom 3 rosters in the NFL last year. I think all of that has been upgraded. You add in the schedule, I'll take the over on the 7.5 here for the Patriots.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
Check the Mic is live every Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, so be sure to hit this subscribe button so you don't miss a thing.
The all-knowing algorithm is convinced that you'll like these videos as well, and frankly, who are we to argue?